This press conference was actually called for by the arrestees who are still being held at Sand Point. First, I want to sort of introduce this thing and kick it off by explaining who I am and why I'm here. Again, my name's Shan. I'm the WTO Action Coordinator for the Ruckus Society. We've been organizing around the World Trade Organization Ministerial for several months now. And I've been up here in Seattle for the last month preparing for what in my view is not a protest, but a citizens' uprising. I've been talking with the police, I've been talking with the mayor's office over the last few weeks. I actually made friendly overtures to the police and to the mayor's office so that we would have no misunderstandings about why we were here and what we were intent on doing. Working with the Direct Action Network, we said repeatedly that we were here to shut down the World Trade Organization because in our view, it's an undemocratic, unelected, unaccountable, and totally non-transparent institution that does not represent the people's will, and therefore it's invalid, and we didn't want it to move forward with its agenda. But again, the Direct Action Network repeatedly explained its four-part nonviolence code, which I believe someone from Dan will talk about again later, in press conferences, in the media, in the public, and with the police and the mayor's office. We reiterated our commitment to nonviolence over and over and over again. We've kept that commitment. We've remained totally nonviolent in the face of amazing police repression over the last few days. And I want to just talk about some verbal agreements that I received from the mayor's office and from the police department that in our view have all been totally disregarded. Yesterday, representatives from Ron Judd from the AFL-CIO, Mike Dolan, Hillary McQuay from Direct Action Network, and some people from the Direct Action Network legal team, and I met with the mayor's office and met with representatives from the police department. We received some promises, essentially. We were obviously very, very concerned about some of the ways that things unfolded on Tuesday and yesterday morning. I just want to tell you what some of those promises were. First of all, we asked that our communications people on the street around the protests and our legal observers and legal teams would not be targeted and not be arrested so that we could help to facilitate the peaceful unfolding of these protests. We felt that it was in the best interest of everyone that we have these communication teams and we have these legal teams intact. They did promise that they would not target communications and legal observers on the scene. They disregarded that, and in fact, made surgical arrests and assaults on communications and legal observers in the streets around the protests. We came to an agreement that nonviolence would quite simply be met with nonviolence. We were in the streets, peaceably assembled, exercising our First Amendment democratic rights, remaining nonviolent. They promised to meet that with appropriate nonviolent measures, and that was disregarded. We also demanded that our arrestees have access to their lawyers and access to the legal team, and that, so far as I understand, has still been disregarded, as the hundreds of arrestees that are out at Sandpoint and the other holding locations around the city have been unable to make contact with their lawyers. And the last thing that I just want to say is that, in my view, and in the view of the Ruckus Society, The fact that the city has had to be locked down, has had to go to what looks to all of us like martial law, is totally indicative of the insidiousness of the World Trade Organization. The insidiousness of the World Trade Organization and their corporate agenda that puts profits before people and before the planet. So I've spoken way too long already. Thanks again for coming. And next speaker will be Celia Alario, who will be speaking on behalf of the Direct Action Network legal team.
Han, one question. The focus here in your comments is on the police. When I spoke to you a few months ago, the police weren't even mentioned. Has the police action taken the focus off some of the issues that need to be addressed?
No, and some other people will address some of the issues around the WTO. Our focus is still primarily on the World Trade Organization. In fact, it's solely on the World Trade Organization. And I believe, certainly in the view of the Ruckus Society, the police and their escalation of repression and violence against peaceful protesters is really the thing that's distracting the world from the important issues at hand.
What are those issues? Specifically, what are those issues?
There'll be time to answer some of these questions after other speakers speak, and we will address these questions. Thanks.
Yes, my name is Celia Alario. That's spelled C-E-L-I-A-A-L-A-R-I-O. And I'm going to read a statement to you from Kevin Bundy, whose last name is spelled B-U-N-D-Y. He is a representative of the legal team. They're a team of volunteer lawyers and activists who have been involved with Dan in making these protests happen. I want to also mention that Nancy Forwaters, who is with the legal team as well, is standing by via cell phone. They were not able to leave where they are at Sandpoint to be here today, but they will be able to field questions that are directly related to the legal team or legal issues via cell phone. But I'll read Kevin Bundy's statement now.
Could you read slowly, please?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Are you with Dan?
No, I am a publicist and an activist. I work on indigenous and human rights and environmental issues, and I work with the Amazon Watch communication team and the Ruckus Society. Here's Kevin Bundy's statement. The violations of human and civil rights that began Tuesday morning are continuing now. People in custody have been, people in custody have been and are being denied food, water, medical attention, and legal representation. And this has been going on for more than 12 hours. The police violence that began in the streets is continuing in custody. However, the spirits of those in custody are very high, and the solidarity is incredibly strong as these brave individuals continue to stand proud in the tradition of American civil disobedience. There's one thing that I particularly would like to relate. I've worked with a lot of organizations that use a lot of various tactics along the spectrum that we have available to us, from legal and political actions that happen through the courts and through policy change to nonviolent civil disobedience like you've been seeing happening in the streets peacefully and nonviolently over the last few days. Yesterday I witnessed what I think may be the most gross violation of freedom of speech I've ever actually witnessed. It happened to a gentleman who I've helped organize press conferences and worked with in the past, on global old-growth forest issues. His name is Victor Minotti. He's with the International Forum on Globalization, which is an organization that has organized teach-ins, seminars, and is officially sanctioned as an NGO observer to be part of the WTO proceedings. Yesterday, Victor had just come from a meeting with other representatives from the NGO forest community and representatives from the trade representative Charlene Barchevsky's office. He was simply walking down the street to get a bagel after his meeting. I was standing diagonally across the street from him at the corner of 5th and Pike, and I saw a small group of people gathering around him to hear an update about the meeting and also to learn a bit more perhaps about the global free logging agreement and its threats to the world's remaining old-growth forests. He was on the sidewalk. He was simply having a conversation. Out of nowhere, running 2 by 2, a small group of police in riot gear ran at full speed onto the sidewalk into the small group of people who were having the conversation. They fell away, they grabbed Victor Minotti and dragged him off. Victor Minotti may call himself an activist, he may have another job title. He was involved in this process. He has a voice that is being recognized by our United States Trade Office. And he was senselessly brutalized, grabbed, and arrested while trying to exercise his freedom of speech. I am absolutely ashamed and abhorred at what is happening in the streets. And I don't think that just because a number of people want to come into town and have a meeting, that we should watch our Constitution fall away. Yeah.
Here on the desk.
My name is Randy Hayes. I'm with the Rainforest Action Network. Despite a small amount of violence in the streets, despite a large amount of violence on the part of the police, we are here today to declare victory in a nonviolent fashion, shutting down the opening of the WTO. That was the goal, that's what we planned to do, and that's what we accomplished. History marked the Democratic Convention in 1968. History marked the demonstrations in Washington, D.C. during the Vietnam War. And history will mark Seattle, the battle in Seattle, for a nonviolent transition to a society with social equity, human rights, and justice for all species and future generations. When you don't have the people power, when you don't have the political power of Bill Clinton, when you don't have the financial power of Bill Gates, you have people power. And this proves today that people power will prevail for the future and the rights of all generations.
Hi, my name is Lhadon, Tethong, and I work with Students for a Free Tibet in New York City. What I want to tell you most, I guess, is why we came here and what we ended up being a part of in Seattle. Many of us in the Tibet movement, Tibetans and non-Tibetans alike, came to Seattle to join in coalition and work with so many of the wonderful people from around the world who are planning, as we're doing now, to protest and speak out against the World Trade Organization for all the reasons that people before me have already said. And yesterday, well, not just yesterday, but yesterday we joined with the steel workers down on the pier, had an amazing rally, and we all very peacefully marched up to the streets above Pike Place Market. I was marching with my mother, a high school teacher from Canada. I was marching with my friend Namgyal, a Tibetan imprisoned in Tibet by the Chinese authorities, who knows all too well the show and use of force. As we walked in the streets peacefully, so clearly, peacefully, and in solidarity with everybody around us. I convinced both my mother and Namgyal that everything would be fine if it came to some kind of standoff with the police, as has been happening, that they could move away easily, that nothing would happen. We would try to stick together, but if they had to, they could leave before any tear gas, probably, or any real use of force, which has been happening. And within maybe 10 minutes of this amazing march, the police just opened fire with their tear gas, with no provocation, with no warnings, literally surrounded us on the streets. And not just the people marching in the streets, but the storekeepers standing on the sidewalks, parents with their children in strollers, elderly people all around. With no provocation, the police opened fire and caused so much panic, so much harm, and so much pain to all of the people in the streets that, I mean, it's amazing the control and the discipline of the crowd in the face of that kind of force and in the face of that kind of One of the things that we did talk about during and after with my mother, with my Tibetan friends and family, one of the things that we talked about was the idea of martial law. And what that means to us as Tibetan supporters and Tibetans, because since 1989, martial law has been declared in Lhasa for the last 10 years by the Chinese authorities. To us, that is something that we work to bring to the world with our free speech, with our freedom of assembly. We try and tell that story of the oppression inside of places like Tibet, as other people do in Burma, as other people do for China. And here we are, thinking we have the protection and the rights of people living in a democratic society to talk about the struggles of the people on the other side of the world, and we're attacked in our own home. Totally unacceptable, totally uncalled for, and completely disheartening for us on the part of the authorities and the government. However, the one thing I will say for us in the Tibet movement and for all of the people working in coalition together, the spirit is so strong and the people are working so hard to show a nonviolent, peaceful, and proactive face to this international community, and I hope that you will all send that message out.
That's right. Police are rioting.
Yes, this is Jody Vibrock, and my name is John Goodman. We're with the United Steelworkers of America. I like to say I've never seen a more disgusting, obscene use of police brutality against United Steelworkers marching in unity with our brothers in the environmental community and our brothers fighting for human rights. I've witnessed things in the last 4 days that I didn't believe could happen in America. People walking in peaceful protest, as the young lady before described, and without provocation, the firing of tear gas and rubber bullets at the people that were trying to exercise their First Amendment rights. I couldn't believe that this was happening in America. It was a rude awakening. I have something here that Jody's going to read. It was very important.
This was given to me this morning. This was given to me this morning by Rosa Guadalupe Lazarde. She couldn't be here. And it's resolution by the women's group condemning police brutality. Whereas women and men from around the world gathered at the First United Methodist Church for a day of discussion on December 1st, 1999, entitled Women, Democracy, Sovereignty and Development, to peacefully voice and demonstrate our concerns to the WTO. Whereas, upon notification by participants who joined us at approximately 5 o'clock of an unprovoked act of brutality by the Seattle police against people moving towards the vicinity of the church to attend the session. Whereas the unprovoked act of brutality included beating with batons by the police and unannounced firing of tear gas and pepper spraying of innocent people not involved in public protest. Whereas some of the people involved included women from our partner organizations. We therefore resolve to condemn the unprovoked police brutality on participants in the streets of Seattle, and further resolve to demand an immediate public apology from all those responsible. The City of Seattle Chief of Police, the Mayor of Seattle, the Governor of the State of Washington, and most importantly, our host, President of the United States, Bill Clinton. These resolutions are from the Women's Environment and Development Organization, grassroots organizations organizing together in sisterhood, Arkansas Public Policy Panel, organizations of Rural Association for Progress, Gabriella, the Daughters Sisters Project, forgive me if I say this wrong, Kuraru Commission, National Congress of Neighborhood Women, Youth for Environmental Sanity, Alliance for Democracy, Metro Detroit Alliance for Democracy, Young Koreans United of Seattle, Pax Christi USA, National Farmers Association.
My name is Mike Dolan. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. It's a Ralph Nader group. I've been in Seattle for, well, going on 8 months now, organizing with the local community and helping to coordinate the arrival of activists and scholars from all over the world to be a part of this historic confrontation between civil society and corporate rule. I want to be really, really very clear that we came not to trash Seattle, but to expose the trashy reputation of the World Trade Organization. One of those activists and scholars was mentioned a few minutes ago, my old friend Victor Minotti. Victor Minotti is a lot of things. Principally, he's a policy wonk. That's what he does. He's out talking about the accelerated tariff liberalization proposal in the WTO this week, and apparently committed the crime of expressing an opinion on a sidewalk. There's been, as people are talking about here, a lot of violence being used against peaceful protesters for crowd control. Over the last several months, I've had the opportunity to discuss with the mayor's office, the city council, and the police department what would be the rules of engagement for this protest, these peaceful protests. I believe that the mayor's office and the police, that the city authorities and the municipal authorities have violated an understanding, a covenant on two separate grounds, on two separate aspects. First of all, with respect to the violence being used for crowd control against peaceful protesters, this clearly runs in the face of what I understood to be, and what I think all of us in the community understood to be, the commitment by the Seattle Police Department to undertake peaceful arrest of peaceful protesters. And as has been demonstrated on the news, every single night this week, that commitment has been violated. So there's been violence done to peaceful protesters. However, there's also been violence done to the United States Constitution. I went by the mayor's office yesterday and picked up a proclamation that he signed yesterday afternoon, which essentially suspends the Constitution in a 50-block area of downtown Seattle. I have copies of it here for members of the media. At this point, my office on 4th Street, People for Fair Trade, and most of downtown around the convention center and the other venues are now protest-free zones. Something I've never encountered in any other community in this country, and I hope never to encounter again.
Constitution-free zones.
I call on the city to do two things: to restrain the police and to show some respect for the protesters, the peaceful protesters, who will this day once again be out on the streets speaking truth to power. And I call for the city again to respect not only the protesters and the peaceful demonstrations, but also, please, to respect the United States Constitution. Thank you.
My name is David Taylor. I am a representative of the Direct Action Network. We've been spending the last 6 months organizing to come to Seattle to use non-violent direct action to protest the horrors of what the WTO has done. We've set forth guidelines for participation in our direct action, which we spent the last 10 days before the Ministerial training several thousand people in the use of nonviolence. Our guidelines stated that people participating in the direct action would not participate in violence, physical or verbal, that they would not have drugs or alcohol or carry weapons into the streets, and that they would not destroy property. The people who came to Seattle participated in the mass nonviolent direct action yesterday and the protests and the protest that shut down the WTO the day before upheld these guidelines. Reports that police were provoked by violent protesters and that is why they used excessive force with tear gas, in my opinion, are completely inaccurate. I spent the last 2 days on the streets. I've been gassed 8 times. I have not raised a finger, other than 2 for peace, to show police that I am not attacking them. In every instance in the last 2 days that I've seen police use of force, including gas, small rubber bullets, percussion grenades, and pepper spray, the protesters had not assaulted the police officers. There was not property destruction going on within the police officers' view of sight. They simply decided that they did not want a crowd in a location and fired gas and rubber bullets at peaceful protesters sitting down or standing, singing songs and dancing in the streets. What I saw yesterday was an escalation of that force. Myself, along with several hundred people from the Direct Action Network, decided to march down to the Steelworkers Rally to show solidarity and support in the strong, vital coalitions we've formed in opposing the WTO. Students and environmentalists stood with labor yesterday and decided to move from that rally to take the streets, to show that there are streets and not let the WTO and the arm of the police repress us. We marched into downtown. We made it several blocks, at which point, with no warning, we were attacked with rubber bullets and gas. The gas they used yesterday was of a much stronger grade than the gas the day before, immobilizing people on contact. People who were disorientated from the gas were immediately clubbed or pepper sprayed. I saw an instance of a person who was not a protester being gassed, not knowing what to do, and then being clubbed by police. As we fled away from the scene, a group of several thousand that originally took the streets stayed together. I believe it was between 300 to 500 people. We were chased by gas down onto 2nd Avenue through Pike's Place Market. We felt that if we stayed together, we would be safer. We were trying to escape the gas. We were not trying to continue our march. We moved down 2nd Avenue with police in riot gear on both sides of us, cordoning the alley, making a canyon through 2nd Avenue. We were chased 10 blocks. On several occasions, I went up to police officers on motorcycle who were re-diverting traffic so they would have a clear path for us to go down to, and pleaded with them, we just want to go. Please let us go. Which way can we go? At one point, a police car spoke through its loudspeaker that said, if you'd like to continue your march, please continue down 2nd Avenue, which we did. 2 or 3 blocks before Seattle Center, police lines closed in on both sides of us, trapping several hundred protesters on a street, at which point they fired tear gas into the crowds who were trapped between the police lines. They ordered them to get on the ground or they would fire more gas, at which point I made it out of the lines and fled. And then they proceeded in mass arrests. These were not people protesting. These people were running away from police that were chasing them, trying to attack them, and basically hunting them. This is not keeping public safety. This is a war that's being waged against us. What's going on in the streets of Seattle is a war. It has moved from a war against people who are exercising their constitutional rights to a war against every person that happens to be within a several block radius when the police decide they don't want people there. And the price that they pay is pepper spray, tear gas, or a baton in the back or side. We will not be intimidated by the show of force and will be on the streets again today. I hope and I pray that the same level of violence does not continue and that we are allowed to safely march through the streets to continue our peaceful, non-violent protest of the World Trade Organization.
My name is Jennifer Whitney. This is Dr. Kirk Murphy. We're representatives of the Direct Action Network medical team. I would say that in the last 2 days we have collectively treated, not just the 2 of us, about 800 people in our clinic and between 2,000 to 3,000 on the streets of Seattle. We've treated people for pepper spray and tear gas injuries. We have treated people for rubber bullet injuries to the face, the head, the whole body. And our team is very crucial because people are being denied access to medical care. I have seen, and no one on my team that I've spoken with has seen, paramedics on the streets treating people. Police are lined up in front of Swedish Hospital, denying access to health care to protesters. To my knowledge, our team, joined by numerous small business owners and people on the streets who are able to, our team and these kind folks that are helping are the only ones providing care to thousands of people exercising their freedom of speech rights. We have set up several clinics that, of course, have to be mobile given the circumstances downtown yesterday. One of our clinics had the fire department actually call the police on the clinic. So the clinic was forced to pick up and move injured people to another location. Our medics are being targeted by the police. Their medical equipment has been confiscated and destroyed in front of them, thrown in the streets. 2 of our medics at least are in jail or missing. Some of our medics have been pepper sprayed directly while they were treating people. Pepper sprayed directly to the eyes while providing care.
In addition, some of our medics have been the target of physical assaults while providing care. They were assaulted from behind, hit with batons and knees. Their protective gear on their face was removed. and they were sprayed. Their protective gear on their face was removed, and they were sprayed with chemical weapons, all for the singular crime of offering compassionate assistance to the victims of the police riot that's been going on over the past 3 days. I want to properly introduce myself. I'm Kirk Murphy. I'm a medical doctor, physician, an academic assistant clinical professor at UCLA for what that's worth, and chair of the environmental committee at Physicians for Social Responsibility in Los Angeles. Been here for the past 2 days providing care to the citizens and bystanders in the streets who've been injured repeatedly by these reckless and provocative actions by law enforcement. In considering what's happened on the streets, it's important to be cognizant of the effects of the chemical warfare agents being used. One is pepper spray, which is carried in a vehicle, a solvent, recognized by no less an authority on harm than the U.S. Army as a mutagen, something that causes permanent changes in the genetic information passed from generation to generation. In susceptible individuals, especially those with respiratory conditions, which number a significant proportion of the population, pepper spray can induce a lethal closing of the airway. We've had numerous cases of people whose lips became blue, the fancy medical term for that is cyanotic, because they couldn't get enough air down their throats after they'd been gassed repeatedly with pepper spray. Some of these were people who were not participating in any way in any constitutionally recognized activity, save for walking from one place to another in the city or merely observing the demonstration. The same respiratory effects are observed with tear gas. In addition, these agents pose a danger to the unborn who are carried in the wombs of pregnant women. We've had numerous pregnant women who were casualties from the tear gas. One of the most important things to remember as we look at these series of catastrophe is what's happening to the casualties on the streets. We have a person in jail right now who is being denied access to medical care. He has a known history of high blood pressure, hypertension. He is complaining of nuchal rigidity, which is doctor talk for severe pain in the back of the neck. He's also complaining of headache. These are signs of a cerebral hemorrhage impending. In other words, an impending stroke. He's reported to our legal team that he has been given no medication for his medical condition. We also have people in jail who are being denied any access to medication for a protest that's been planned over a year. The failure of the King County authorities to plan that there would be a certain number of patients with HIV, a certain number of patients with seizure disorder, a certain number of patients with hypertension, a certain number of patients, in other words, with common chronic medical conditions, is an inexcusable abdication of their responsibility to protect the public.
We've been treating people out in the field. We've been breathing a lot of tear gas. I apologize for both of us. It's difficult to speak loud right now.
Yes, both of us have been.
So we can see, please.
Excuse us. We'll probably want to proceed with just trying to answer these fundamental questions, and we'll try and be as accessible to the people in the back as possible. As Jennifer mentioned, we've both been in the street yesterday and the day before, treating casualties in massive numbers. Yesterday, I directly observed along 2nd Street and at the interruption of the march that was being carried on with the steelworkers, a massive and coordinated assault with tactics that clearly were designed to maximize the number of casualties, to maximize the degree of terror inflicted on the civilian population, and to maximize, in effect, the disruption and the use of chemical warfare across as many blocks of Seattle as is possible. We directly saw the application of large clouds of pepper spray into the Pike's Place market in general. We are told that the fishmongers there had to be discarding all of their seafood because it was chemically contaminated. This is an example of the indiscriminate and senseless nature of the police violence that has gone on yesterday and also on the previous day. I'm a psychiatrist by training. If an individual acts in a way that demonstrates they've taken leave of their senses and they are a danger to the health and safety of others. In every state in this union, it is recognized that the most humane thing to do is to temporarily detain that individual, place that individual in a situation where they can no longer be of harm to themselves and others, and get that individual appropriate treatment. Regrettably, the civil statutes for detention for danger to others from a psychiatric disability cannot be applied in any meaningful way to the Seattle Police Department, and that is a shame, because what I observed on the street yesterday is behavior consistent with an organization that is indeed insane. As we all know, the battle about the WTO is a battle on its most fundamental level to protect individual living things. The living things on our planet, be they human or non-human. What we've seen yesterday and the day before was a combination of the WTO's ongoing efforts to deprive us from the protection of life on this planet that's afforded by regulations in various jurisdictions around the globe. What we saw yesterday was a concerted effort to deprive individuals in this country of the protection afforded by the United States Constitution. Yet another casualty in the WTO's effort to make the trains run on time for global commerce. We'd like to close by telling you about a few of the individuals we've seen injured on the street. One of the people I saw yesterday was an individual in a wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair. He is almost completely unable to move his lower extremities because of advanced multiple sclerosis. He was in the crowd of people who were indiscriminately tear-gassed in the area between 2nd and 4th yesterday afternoon. In order to finish their mayhem, law enforcement officers then beat him with batons. Another individual of whom I directly witnessed was a woman who was in her 60s who had a significant head injury from a concussion grenade. The people who like to tell us they know what they're doing with these things say there are no fragments from the grenade. I'd like them to explain the very significant wound to this woman's face immediately adjacent to her orbits, the places around her eyes. The third severe casualty of which I am aware was reported to me by an RN who is the person who told us that she was locked out of Swedish hospital yesterday because the police had taken her ID. She was reporting for work. And she told us that her supervisor informed her that the police's goal in stationing people at the entrances of Swedish was to deny protesters access to medical care to help keep them off the streets. We now have the police deciding who should do triage in the ER. In any event, this individual, this woman, found a 5-year-old girl who had essentially been trampled when a crowd panicked because they were being indiscriminately sprayed with chemical warfare agents. She brought this 5-year-old girl to Swedish hospital. She is told that the 5-year-old girl is currently a patient in the intensive care unit. Before Jennifer talks about additional casualties, as a physician, I'm obliged to point out that the use of chemical warfare agents against a population is a violation of international law and a violation of treaties to which the United States is signatory. Again, we see the WTO placing itself above the protection of citizens. Moreover, the repeated, sustained application of chemical warfare agents to specific individuals in order to force their compliance with orders or regulations is an act of torture, pure and simple, recognized as such by Amnesty International and Physicians for Social Responsibility, and also a violation of international treaties and the United States Convention on Torture.
Time left, but I just want to say a few other cases that I'm aware of. I know of 3 major projectile wounds to the head from tear gas canisters that were fired at head level, obviously. I know of medics who were allowed to go into a perimeter. Their gas masks were then confiscated And one of them told the police that she was asthmatic and needed the gas mask in order to provide care. She was denied the mask, and then they were all denied entry to be able to care for people that were in this cordoned-off area. I treated several people last night who were walking down the street on Broadway just having dinner. They were out of the protest-free zone, and they were just going home, and the police came and pepper sprayed them directly in the face for no reason. Multiple folks with asthma who just were caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and who are now who could now be suffering permanent lung damage due to this. And countless injuries to the head, the whole body, from rubber bullets ranging from this size to what they call bean bags that are webbing with pellets sewn into it. These things can kill. This is war. And our medical team is being targeted as well as the entire civilian population of Seattle.
My name is Rice Baker-Yeboh, RICE-BAKER-YEBOAH, and I'm here representing the student groups. The message that this nation needs to understand, that it is the children who are being attacked in the streets of this city. Our student leaders have been specifically targeted for arrest and are now detained at Sandpoint Naval Station. Over the past few days, we've witnessed students evidence courage far beyond their years. And we have risen up, and we will not rest until this threat to our sovereignty has been vanquished. We as students, maybe naively, maybe not so naively, believe in the Constitution. And in the Constitution it is stated that when our democracy is threatened, it is our obligation to stand up and answer that threat. And that is what we are going to do. And that is what we have done. Once again, I will state it. These are children. Very few of the people out there on the front lines are over 30 or 40 years old. Many of them are in their 20s. Many of them are high school students. And they face the rubber bullets. And they face the pepper spray. And they face the gas. And they kept going forward. They kept going forward. And today, we will go forward again. Because this is about the next century. We're fighting for our future. We're fighting for the future of all children on this planet. For life on this planet, and we will not rest. This is the most critical point in this nation's history. Are we going to be a corporate aristocracy, or will we remain a government for the people and by the people? On behalf of my brothers and sisters who are now detained, at the Naval Air Station at Sandpoint, we demand their immediate release with no charges. All charges are clear. We demand immediate release. The fact that they have been detained under circumstances without the right to use the phone, without any of their habeas corpus rights, without any access to attorneys, that is illegal. These people are political prisoners, and they are held within this nation as political prisoners, and it is everybody's responsibility to stand up and say no to this. For if we do not, we are going to lose control of this nation, and corporations are going to dominate the world in the future, and all life will be threatened. The students have risen up, and now we are calling for everybody everywhere. If you are a father, you are letting down your child if you do not come out and stand in the street today and say no to this. If you are a mother, you are also letting down your child if you do not step out into the street and take responsibility for what this nation is about. Freedom.
is Shannon Wright. I'm with the Rainforest Action Network, and I was released from jail about 5 hours ago. I wanted to tell you briefly my experience yesterday. I too have been tear gassed many times, and it's very hard to speak very loud. I will try to. Yesterday, at about 10 a.m., I was attacked from behind by plainclothes officers when I was very far away from any police line. I was walking from the Sheraton Hotel back to my car. Two friends nearby were similarly attacked from behind, thrown on the ground by officers who did not identify themselves until we were handcuffed and pulled into a storefront nearby, at which point we were arrested. We were nowhere near a police line. We were nowhere near a group. We had actually left any area of conflict, and we were headed back to our cars. This is a violation of our rights. Once I was in jail, I witnessed several things that were very disturbing. The first one being a group of women who were non-violently sitting in a jail cell in a corner were pepper sprayed by the police in the eyes at short distance. These are non-violent protesters opposed to WTO's violation and undermining of our Constitution and our hard-won environmental, health, and labor safety laws. Once I was taken to jail here in Seattle, the King County Correctional Facility, women were consistently denied access to speak with their attorney. There are many women that have been under police custody now for 24 hours and have been denied access to speak with their attorney directly. The attorneys are at the jail and asking to speak with the women. The women are at jail and asking to speak with their attorneys, and this is not being allowed to go forward. On top of this, the women have been consistently told that at the next step they'll get to speak with their attorney if they just cooperate with the police. The women will cooperate with the police, they get to their jail cell, and they're told that they are not allowed to speak with their attorney unless the attorney specifically asks for them, which they are doing. They're being given that legal roundabout. This is a violation of our Constitution and our rights. The WTO is now a household word in America. What people might not know is the WTO is not just about a conflict in Seattle. Through the WTO, our hard-won environmental, human rights, our labor safety, and important environmental standards like the Clean Air Act have actually been undermined. We are all breathing dirtier air today because of WTO. The Venezuelan oil industry wanted to import oil that did not meet the standards of our Clean Air Act. Through a WTO ruling, that oil has been allowed to be imported. The WTO has actually begun to undermine our laws. There are many other examples that you've heard today. That is why people are on the streets. The police response that I have seen is akin to a paranoid military dictatorship, not my country, the United States of America. The Rainforest Action Network is calling for a federal and international investigation into the police activities, the role of the United States government, and the transnational corporations that back it in trying to squelch peaceful political protesters who have a message that is in favor of the United States citizen and our well-being. Thank you.
Je suis Christine Tellen et je suis agricultrice sur le Larzac avec José Bové.
My name is Christine Tellen, T-H-E-L-E-N, and I come from the Larzac region of the south of France, and I'm a peasant farmer, and I'm for the same union as José Bové, the Peasants Confederation, la Confédération Paysanne.
Je veux simplement dire au nom de la délégation française du contrôle citoyen contre l'OMC que au pays des États-Unis où il y a la statue de la liberté, nous ferons savoir que le droit à la manifestation et le droit de l'homme ne sont pas respectés.
I'd like to say, on behalf of the Peasants Confederation and on behalf of French citizens, if I may, that we are appalled by the lack of democracy and the lack of citizen freedom in this country, and we support you.
Nous ferons savoir ça à toute la presse française et nous soutenons votre mouvement. Courage!
We will bring this message back to you, and we are with you in the struggle. Thank you.
Well, that's all our speakers. There are a bunch more people who are happy to talk to press. The legal team is actually available for comment if pressed. They're actually on the phone. They've been here this whole time via the airwaves.
The mayor and staff have been invited?
Have been invited where?
Here.
No, quite frankly, they've given their press conferences, which have run in heavy rotation in the media, and we just felt it was our chance to give our side. We're certainly happy to keep speaking with the mayor's office and with the police, and we hope that they will answer some of these allegations and some of these charges.
Could you please address what those specific charges are, the issues that you're trying to address to the WTO specifically?
Well, quite simply, I think I said it in the very beginning. In our view, the World Trade Organization is undemocratic, unelected, unaccountable, non-transparent. It does not respond to the people's will. It responds to the corporate will to put profits before people and the planet. It undermines our democracy. It undermines our sovereignty. There are a lot of people here with varying concerns about what the World Trade Organization and their agenda represent to their lives and represent to the future of life on this planet, including coalitions that have formed, alliances that have formed around this issue like we've never seen before in the United States: labor, environment, human rights. And I think it's clear from the people who have come out and been in the streets over the last few days that, again, as I said before, this is not a protest. This is not an easily marginalized lefty protest. This is, quite simply, a citizens' uprising. I don't know if we can just take a lot of questions from the podium. There's too many speakers who spoke. There are a lot of people here who are happy to talk to the press after the event, in the hallway, out in the courtyard. The last thing that I'd like to do as a service, really, is give out the mayor's office number for the citizens of Seattle who have concerns about the way the police have reacted to nonviolent, peaceful protests in their city and the way that they've been targeted. The mayor's office number, 206-684-7395. If what you've seen out in the streets is abhorrent, as we believe it is, please call the mayor's office, let them know. The number again is 206-684-7395.
Can you repeat that number, please?
206-684-7395.
I'd like to give another number. I was complaining. I was up in the Broadway neighborhood last night. As many of you know, so many horrific things happened there. And I complained, as many did, to the police station there. They gave me this number for internal investigations. Internal investigations, and that is 684-8797. I'll repeat that. Internal investigations.
Okay, sorry, I thought she was going to say
684-8797. They encouraged me to contact them.